Snapped awake again by the genie of his nightmares, Basim searches in Anbar for something more. He steals from the rich with Nihal to survive and to feed the children with nowhere else to go. But when Nihal has accepted this life and believes escape is a child's naive dream, Basim, stirred by the memory of his idealist father who the city cast aside, believes children need not eat stolen food, that this isn't how it has to be. And he sees a way. A hidden one darkens Dervish's door. Basim has done their bidding for pittance for so long, but he sees them like the children see Basim, as wings, purpose, and freedom. He asks for a place among them. He begs. Roshan sees another child. And Nihal sees it too. He's a dirty street thief. In this world, that's all he'll ever be. She knows it, she knows Roshan knows it. How many more nights of hunger before he figures it out too? Both Basim and Nihal are effectively characterized with the whats and whys of conflicting beliefs. The narrative is charged, and a strong theme is established. Suffer, hope, or live with acceptance. It's soon brought to a climax. Basim knows how to prove himself. A chest sought by the assassins locked away in the Winter Palace. Nihal won't let Hope kill her friend, so she helps him slip inside. Parkour, pickpocketing, stealth, and a climactic infiltration within 20 minutes. Mirage's introduction warrants praise for its efficiency. They find the chest, and the men who own it. Men who bark orders at the Caliph himself. There's a strange disc inside that brightens to Basim's touch. Gold light dances to form the image of one figure's torment at the hands of another. The Caliph returns. Nihal saves Basim with a knife to his throat. Anbar is pulled apart to find the killer. The child thieves are executed as retribution, and Basim, in his grief, blames Nihal. Roshan offers a way out. Mirage gets off to a very strong start. Strong characters, strong themes, strong drama, and a hook. How will Basim overcome his guilt? What's going to happen to Nihal? What do the images mean? And what of the Jinni? Things begin to falter in our shorter stay at Alamet. It's a simple disappointment that we never get to go to Alamet. Pretty though it is, we're confined to an intervening canyon. The deeper disappointment is what Alamet comes to mean. For the birthplace of the assassins in our world and their modern mythology in Vladimir Bartol's foundational book, it's remarkable how absent Alamet is of the assassin's belief. You're taught how to fight with a sword, how to push past fear and leap in faith, but you're never inducted or so much as introduced to what the assassins think, to the why of it all, the significance of parkour, the truth of eagle vision, the tenets of the creed. You want to sell the fact and the fantasy of becoming an assassin? The part where Basim learns what it means would help. It would also help if anyone in Mirage's Brotherhood spoke or behaved like what we're meant to believe they are. Radicals, ideologues of ideas so strongly held that they have given their lives and deaths to them. The people you meet are normal and nice and appear to believe in a little more than just that. It would help, for the sake of motivation, if we were ever convinced of why we're meant to hate the Templars with such particular focus, or if the assassins convincingly reflected the light the earlier Basim saw them in, as liberators and hope for the poor. But they don't. I don't think the word freedom was used a single time, and that drains his decision to join them of heart. The finer details of Basim's characterization share a similar blindness. Roshan recognizes his absence in mind and soul and attempts to teach him focus, but all that's overtly represented as the root of his distance is the Jinni from his nightmares, when what would seem far more emotionally significant is the fact that Basim's reckless plan had a nationwide political impact and got 6 children murdered. Guilt, I would assume? No such feeling is portrayed. The event isn't even acknowledged, as if it never happened at all. Absent of mind and soul? Yeah, that's Basim. It's our time at Alamet too. Mirage has begun to slip. Nur returns wounded. Mirage begins with a promising cast and intrigue, but it fails the assassins on one of its most important tasks, momentum. Baghdad is another crossroads of the world encircled by another sun-scorched desert. But what most distinctly sets it apart from Egypt and Constantinople is its recency. As games inch and leap closer towards realism, realism is almost always put ahead of style. So now we walk a Baghdad with 1,000 finer details, so vivid, so true, and so committed to that fact that it hesitates to tell the lies Constantinople had to. Atmosphere, vibe, the art direction that emerges when you have to paint over the gaps in reality. And that's a sad thing, because Mirage fancies itself a mystical game, with themes of identity and deception, an old world bleeding up from the shimmering sands that its setting can't and won't reflect. For a game called Mirage, it's the void of magic in the wilderness that disappoints the most. The dunes are beautiful, they're also plain and literal, and unfortunately, populated mostly by bandit camps. We've lost something. But there is a lot to be said for what we've gained. For all the truths Baghdad can capture that Constantinople never could. Some of the best world-building industry-wide is here in Assassin's Creed, because they're not building a world, they're remembering one, albeit with a few choice embellishments. What a world it was. What a privilege it is to have these magnificent creations as your memory, and to be the only one in the business of bringing them back to life. What else could compete with the Grand Bazaar, or the Palace of Green Domes? The colors, the arches, the doors, all the small details of history, rendered so lucidly that you believe your screen has become a time portal. Reality has some really cool lore. It was a confident move to scatter history nodes across the city by default, but it's not just about what's specific to history. Ubisoft's characteristic talent is the detail of life. One of the first things I noticed about Baghdad in comparison to most video game cities was how convincing the birdsong was. Morning feels right because the pigeons sound right. People interact with the city like they actually live in it, using fountains to bathe, legs hanging from ledges, hustling, playing, camels traffic through streets, boats through the rivers, flamingos flock and fly on approach, while donkeys just generally seem clueless, which I'll charitably assume is a donkey thing and not an AI thing. There is a convincing busyness to Baghdad, a movement of life that makes the streets feel like arteries and the world real. There's gameplay to this too. Mirage returns and matures notoriety. This is the first time since Assassin's Creed 3 you've had to think about what you're doing in public, and that now extends to things like stealing from chests or dealing with wanted posters. In Mirage, people actually look at posters, and if they see you, they'll recognize you, and if they recognize you, they'll call the guards, and if you rip it down and the guards see you do it, they'll attack. It is a compelling thing for the world to convincingly respond to your actions. It can also create its own kind of encounter. How do you steal from a chest in public without being seen? Notoriety increases your chances of being randomly recognized on the streets. If that happens at the wrong time, do I run? Shut him up? Or deal with the guards he'll warn before they have a chance to see me? Among the most common criticisms of Baghdad is a lack of variation, and yet it is clear that Ubisoft did with the visuals as much as could have been done without the liberation of style. The round city is pristine to the point of embellishment, and it is surrounded by impoverished neighborhoods that work dyes and metal. Perhaps then the smarter thing would have been different kinds of variation. Haggling merchants in car, pickpockets in Anbar, a different kind of enemy, different patrols, some different music. Mirage's soundtrack is excellent, but most tracks aim to meet a general Mirage feel, without distinguishing elements that could characterize one place as different from another. Dreams of Venice wouldn't fit in Monteriggioni, but Rooftops works just as well in the desert as it does on the rooftops. Baghdad is imperfect, distanced from the game it's a part of. It is also a reminder of why I keep coming back to Assassin's Creed, why I always give it another chance. It's beautiful. Its magic is simpler, plainer, but it's there. I didn't want to fast travel because I liked being in Baghdad more than I liked saving time, and that didn't surprise me. This is Ubisoft. Their strengths are as predictable as their failures. Listen to this. Hey guys, it's me, Whitelight, and as you can see, I'm cranking that A beautiful game stands to benefit from good speakers as much as a good screen, but what limits both is price. That's where Raycon comes in. Big name audio quality at half the cost, and years of iterative improvements that have amounted to the newest generation of everyday earbuds. Fast charging, wireless charging, active noise cancellation, weather resistance. It'll work with multiple devices at once with Siri or Alexa. It's got simple but robust touch controls, 3 optional sound profiles to suit your tastes, and all of that upon a solid foundation. An ergonomic design that doesn't start to ache with prolonged use or fall out of your ears at the slightest twitch. I've been using my Raycons to listen to the Wails of the Damned on my everyday walks, where nobody knows that I'm the #1 Ubisoft critic in the world, but everybody still looks twice because my coral blue Raycons are legitimately snazzy as heck. And I'd still be in luck if I wanted to be hip, or one of those demure young gamer ladies who wear the cat ear headphones. Click the link below or go to buyraycon.com/whitelight to get 15% off your Raycon purchase and the shipping charge wiped. You know, Bassam could be wearing Raycons while doing all that parkour. Among Baghdad's many talents is the basis it provides for movement. The degradation of parkour in modern creeds was a matter of setting as much as the gutted moveset. More open fields, fewer cities, and within those cities, fewer things to use. This is what Baghdad seeks to address, and Christ on a $15 skin pack camel did it address that problem. A city turned monkey gym, constant variation in every direction, an airtight, multi-planar weave of choice. And that's what's so strange. The baffling contrast of Mirage's movement is that it makes every effort to make parkour something you can always do, but almost no effort at all to make parkour good. Mirage is the product of 13 entries and 16 years of refinement, but it never failed to surprise me. It's glitchy, sometimes with a brilliant spectacle of Unity's complete technical meltdowns as Basim becomes one with a wall, breaks out the warp drive, or performs what I can only imagine to be some kind of Isu mating ritual, but more often in the sense that you'll have to tolerate stumbling into a constant peppering of invisible potholes, an irrepressible micro-stutter of the legs. Sometimes Basim just won't climb things that should be climbable. Sometimes he will and then not, and then will and then not, and then will if you're lucky. Sometimes Basim will drop his pace to a leisurely stroll for no clear reason, as if for a moment he worries about whether he left the gas on. Catching ziplines can work in the clunkiest fashion possible, but mostly has you bouncing off it as if you jumped into a wall. Basim likes to stumble onto ropes instead of neatly connecting to them. You'll still get stuck on knee-high objects like chairs, cushions, or the sides of stairways, and check out the new pole swings. That's not a glitch, that's just how they look. Then there's a fact of biology. Mirage shares a skeleton with Valhalla. Those aren't the genes you want when you're building an athlete. As if to satirize Ubisoft's baffling affection for contextual control schemes that tie way too many actions to the same button, Valhalla and Mirage have crouch and descend on the same button. So whenever you descend, you need to make sure you've toggled back out of the crouch state you've probably put yourself in. And that can be harder than it sounds, because the crouch indicator, that dot in the center screen, disappears during parkour animations. Wonderful. Like Eivor, Basim likes to pause before making jumps. I don't know why, or why it wasn't treated as a priority, because it is the biggest reason that this game lacks a sense of flow. Quick jumps from beam to beam or from anything tightly packed together feel robotic, gamey, and awkward. Then there's the problems with Eivor's sprint. There is a normal run, and there is a sprinting run. The sprint is not very fast, but to get up to sprinting speed, there is a period of acceleration. Now, certain movements will reset the sprint, like mounting or jumping to a non-standing object, which means you need to accelerate back up to speed. I don't like that. It's smart if you're looking to emphasize the weight of a Viking, but all it is to a light-footed thief is a ball and chain. It also means that doing things that reset the sprint feel less good, because they come with a small but real mechanical punishment, and it's all the more frustrating when you lose your momentum for no reason, because now it takes longer to get it back. The combination of Mirage's lack of polish and lack of design sense is the characterizing of parkour less like the flight of a skilled practitioner and more like an unpracticed struggle. And the crazy part is, you've got people calling movement in Mirage smooth. Smooth? Your experience is about as consistent as cartwheeling through a minefield, and Basim has to accelerate from 0 to 60 like he's a Fiat Panda tugging a canal boat. How low does the bar have to be to call this smooth? But that's the point, really, isn't it? The bar? Parkour in Mirage is usually functional, and it's cool because it's a representation of parkour, which is cool, but it doesn't feel very good, and it's not actively fun. And even though it's the thing you're doing most of the time, more often than fighting, sneaking, or talking, we seem to have accepted that movement in Assassin's Creed sort of works, at best, because it has been this way for such a long period of time. It is, by definition, normal. Well, I think what's normal is too little, and though it might be unwise to bet on better, it's long past time we kicked up our expectations. What I want to talk about next is depth. It's important for me to say, since I played a part in popularizing a recognition of the advanced potential of older parkour systems in Assassin's Creed and the communities that formed around them, that my problem with Mirage isn't that it isn't enough like the old games. It's strange that it isn't like the old games. It would have been the easiest way to be good. It has the old moves, it has the old level design. It is, after all, a return to form. But my actual problem has nothing to do with history. Mirage's movement isn't good. That's it. So let's take this from the ground up. These are simple questions. Can I express myself? Can I develop skill with a system that would allow me to achieve some useful end? The answer to both is no, and the reason for both is the same. You don't really have a moveset. As such, the ability of one player to behave differently from another is incredibly limited. You can't even jump. Every jump you can do is contextual, and you can only jump from the edge of a surface. And the only choice you have is whether or not to use free run up, which allows you to maximize height and distance if there's a range of possible targets. What does that mean? Firstly, it means the complete inability to do certain kinds of thing. If I'm running on a surface that goes underneath a pole or a rope or an overhang, and I want to climb that overhang, only a manual jump can allow me to do that, because auto parkour must always assume I want to keep running. If I want to land on this part of an upcoming rooftop instead of this part, I need manual control to let me jump before the edge. If I want to avoid climbing this wall, I need manual control to let me jump from the tallest part of a nearby rooftop. I need the manual jump to let me catch the this rope. I need the manual jump to cut corners smoothly, in large part because it's the manual jump that allows you to avoid having to convince the auto parkour to detach your assassin from sticky objects. Given basic standards of control, many of Assassin's Creed's rough edges would be far easier to manage. The final thing the manual jump allows you to do is express yourself, to jump because you felt like it, because you're an athlete, a bird-like blade, because you're free, you're an assassin. How could I possibly connect to that role when I can't even move in ways games have allowed us to since the time Mirage is set? But it doesn't seem such an absurdity anymore. After all, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the last Assassin's Creed with the jump button. It has been 10 years since Ubisoft trusted the player to do what Mario can do. Now we can talk about the old moves, not because I believe they're fundamentally necessary, but because Mirage has them, builds for them, and is proud of them. The traditional foundation of advanced movement in Assassin's Creed is ejects. That is, the ability to jump out to the side or to the back while climbing. It was useful. Ejects gained height quicker than clambering did. If you searched for places where you could do that, you'd be rewarded. The second benefit was that most parkour began with a fast wall run from a standing position into a slower climb. So if you could eject onto something you could stand on, then you could get another wall run and climb the same distance as the player who didn't, much faster. It was useful, and it looked cool. It was fun. Mirage is like a history lesson for what happened as the franchise plowed on. Perhaps the worst part of Unity's legacy was making ejects contextual. Oh, that fucking word. Before, you pressed a button and you would eject. Now, you press a button, but you will only eject if you're in a valid position to eject. A context. If you aren't, you'll either do nothing or something else. So, to prevent unintended movements, contexts need to be consistent, logical, and readable. They're not. They weren't then, and they aren't now. There are thousands of places where internal logic says you should be able to eject, that you can't, or at least not without the use of one of several potential input techniques that are completely unintuitable and can only be learned from a YouTube tutorial. Some of those places are barely even distinguishable from places where you can eject. So what are the chances? Let's put a number to it. I'd say 50%. If you're a goat like Ropatopoulos, you're in the top 1% of parkour enthusiasts, and you massively limit the scope of what you'd even try, it's still far from 100. Because of this, you can't plan ahead and expect those plans to work. You can't improvise or be creative and expect not to be punished for trying. I've said this before, about a 10-year-old game. I find that frustrating, but on account of being so closely related to Valhalla 2, Mirage is victim to one problem Unity never had. The RPG games unofficially recharacterized ejects as dismounts, and accordingly blunted their ability to gain height. Mirage's post-launch patch attempted to revert that change. Ejects got their range back. It was the parkour update, and it was received by the fanbase with half-deserved praise. But what it failed to do was change the ejects' priorities. They can go up, but they still kind of like to go down. A lot of the time an eject fails in Mirage, you did an eject, but it took you to the least useful target of everything it could have chosen. Basim made this, so I know he can make this. But he won't, because he wants to do this instead. Basim loves to eject into hang instead of ejecting into a stand, and even when you land on the same thing either way, Basim will drop as close as possible instead of jumping as far away, because at heart, Mirage doesn't understand the eject as a jump. Oh, and as for the dives, not even the parkour enthusiasts know. You get lucky. You play a certain angle and pray. There have been worse iterations of parkour, but none more painful. Baghdad is a lucid recollection of level design conventions that were founded and developed for things you can't do anymore. Arrangements whose logic was written for ejects. Ropes meant to be dived to. I see what Altair could have done here. My hands remember the inputs, but there's nothing I can do. Moving in Mirage is like being brought to a skate park without a skateboard and trying to have fun walking up the ramps. There have been worse iterations of movement, but this is worse than every Assassin's Creed before Syndicate. I think that should be enough. I also think it's troubling that the main thing you do in Assassin's Creed no longer shows any interest in being good. But if video games are an art form, if Assassin's Creed does not just contain art, but is itself art, then perhaps we ought to move beyond the reductive view that says every moment of a game that can be fun should be fun. This isn't just about fun. Assassin's Creed's parkour fails to live up to its own premise, as an expression of freedom. Isn't that what parkour is? Defined by the use of architecture in ways that were not intended, in ways the normal person could not and would not. For fun, speed, thrill, and clarity. That is what parkour means to Basim, as an impassioned thief, and as an extension of their beliefs to observe from above free of dogma or restraint. That is what parkour means to the Assassins. That's why we're associated with an eagle. Ubisoft have forgotten. Assassin's Creed's parkour should be good. It's not just that it would be more fun, it's that movement is close to the spirit of the series, and for it to be imprisoning instead of freeing makes Assassin's Creed less. there's my UN address. Do I get to shake hands with the president now? Okay, let's give Basim a rest, and complain instead about one of the things that makes him boring. Act 2 has now begun. It's most clearly characterized by the fact that the story is no longer interested in drama. That's a bold choice. You return to Dervish, naturally anticipating some level of tension on account of the children who he was protecting who we got killed. That? Nah. Water under the bridge, mate. Here's where the next Templar will be. Huh? You return to Nihal, naturally anticipating a similar level of tension, on account of the fact that we blamed her for the children that we got killed, shortly after having killed the leader of the entire Abbasid Caliphate and watched an Alien Live Leak clip. But the same thing happens. Forgiveness comes immediately. I can't even find a scar. Man, I still hold a grudge on people for saying human revolution is mid. Can't imagine there'd be no need to discuss blaming me for flattening an orphanage. She's obsessed with these ancient mysteries, that's fine. Characterize it as her trying to make those deaths mean something. Don't just change the subject. Mirage has an allergy to emotion. It's afraid of it, haunted in its dreams by the notion of feeling. It's cold, and this is where it begins. It's also where the campaign begins. It's a series of mysteries, a return to the deepest roots there are in that way, as we once again stalk the streets of a Middle Eastern city, searching for clues for the identities of masked members of a hidden sect. In Baghdad, we are tasked with the killing of the entire order of black silhouettes. But as for the order, that's up to you. You decide which region of content you want to do first, which leads you want to follow first, and at times, even which objectives in a mission. This structural design is now commonplace in modern gaming, brought forward in large part by Ubisoft's own Far Cry 5, but we've accepted it as the norm without question. Well, I've got some questions, because it is one of the biggest reasons that no game with this structure has a consistently good story. Imagine if you could experience the chapters of a book or the scenes of a movie in any order. The only way to make that coherent would be to ensure that nothing happens in one chapter that could have any effect on any other. In simple terms, you'd need to kill consequence. It didn't matter in Far Cry 5. Characters were understandably isolated and the one through line, you, were a blank slate. But this isn't Far Cry 5. Mirage's structure has characters stuck in their regions and keeps Basim from growth. He can't change, even in the sense of simply being affected by what has recently happened. And that is one of the biggest reasons why Basim stops feeling like a person during Act 2. The Jinni can't change either. So when Basim kills his major targets and the demon stalks the dream shadows, he can screech and he can stare, but he can't go any further. That happens once, then twice, then it's predictable, and quite clear that Jimmy's all screech but no scratch, and so the central conceit of the game is made to look farcical. You end up with 4 reruns of the same cutscene that serve only to remind us that a through line exists, waiting a long wait for the linearity that will allow it to manifest. The same thing happens in smaller frames. One lead can't impact another, and what this does to the game is flatten it. There's no rising tension, there are no rising stakes. Mirage can't have momentum. It's one flat line. So you'd expect the benefits of this structure to really be something, huh? Well, apparently this isn't obvious to Mirage, but having a choice between numerous things only means something when what you're choosing between has differences. The freedom to do Giza or Memphis first, to war in the bitter Whitetail Mountains, or to traverse the haunted fields of Weeping Bliss, is the freedom to choose what kind of experience you want to have next. It is a choice of theme, tone, and fantasy, and when your game is at its core an adventure, the freedom to be directed by your own preferences, to know that you are where you are because you chose to be, can be immensely valuable. That doesn't work in Mirage, in part because Mirage isn't an adventure, it's a task, but mostly because the differences between the things you're choosing between are minimal. Ka and Sharkia aren't very different, and leads within Ka or Sharkia aren't very different either. It's not nothing, but it's close enough to render Mirage incapable of answering the first question it should have asked itself. Why would anyone wish to do one thing before another? The second was, would that be worth the cost? I can answer the second. The third was, how could anyone tell what a region's differences would be before they've chosen? I can make a strong assumption about what Giza will mean, or a region associated with Jacob, but Ka? Abbasia? If I don't know what I'm choosing between, my choice is tantamount to a dice roll, which is exactly what happened. When the time came to pick the next region, I went with whatever word was coolest, because there was nothing else to go on, and in return for that freedom, the narrative is imprisoned. This structure has become a quiet plague on the stories of modern games. It's worth every drop of scrutiny. But there is one thing the campaign does well. It gets out of its own way. It keeps up a high pace of good stealth arenas, and it does very little else. So what's the deal with Mirage's stealth? Well, I'll tell you what isn't the deal. Social stealth. It's back. or so I'm told, but there's a difference between containing the mechanics and designing for them to express. Social stealth needs close groups of civilians to move as one, but you'll rarely see such a thing on Mirage's streets. People tend to keep their distance. It also needs encounter spaces to make the use of people possible and effective. It needs this, for example. This is the only example. The Caravanserai is the one place in Mirage where blending can be a central means of stealth. Disguise mechanics like kidnapping don't return, hireable factions do, but they don't do much to change things. Blend groups are exceptionally rare and cost the most valuable currency in the game to hire, which wasn't the smartest move in a game that makes them a shittier deal than ever, because they've also undergone a crucial change. Used to be, they'd follow you. Now it's you who follow them. Ubisoft set the routes. When it's up, off they fuck, which is both a hard limit to their usefulness and a simple fact. You can't make novel plans with blend groups anymore. You can't even be precisely sure where they'll take you, which will be a great shame, the one time you decide to pay of the 3 times you see them. There are musicians and mercenaries too. You pay them, they stand there, and they'll distract whoever's close. Well, that's what they say they'll do. I was stunned at how often Ubisoft hadn't placed them close enough to the closest guards. You pay them, they stand there, you find out there's no refund policy. The other problem is that they're mostly useful for distracting guards on the ground level because you can't move them elsewhere, which in a game as vertical as Assassin's Creed is the least useful place to be. Social stealth is back, but you could hardly tell if it wasn't. For a game so proud of being a return to form, it was something of a disappointment that whatever would serve to set it apart from other contemporary AAA stealth systems, or to make it feel more like older Assassin's Creeds, turned out to be a trick of the light. Almost like I can't remember the word. Mirage, like Assassin's Creed always has, conceives of stealth as being about the killing of enemies. It's about doing lots of damage to the opposing faction in a short period of time, with brief cycles of planning and execution. You're a knife through butter. You optimize the cut. And Mirage dutifully follows the modern AAA stealth design handbook to make it so. Predator drones, detective vision, and permanent enemy tagging reduce the information gathering phase of stealth to a blink instant. You have everything you need to know to start making plans within moments of entering an arena. Marksmen are Mirage's way to limit Enkidu, but that doesn't make much difference to a game where you can do this. Their actual benefit is that using the heightened senses of an assassin more than your pet UAV feels less impersonal and much less ridiculous. You kill quiet, you move quiet. Detection is limited and gauges feel slow, making it easy to recover from mistakes. You have more options than ever to erase mistakes you can't escape from. Cover is everywhere, be it walls or grass, which when paired with advanced movement options, allows for the excision of the need to wait or to hide. Oh, and enemies are thick as pig shit too. It's fun. It's fun to be this silent wind of death, dancing from target to target, optimizing the cut. It was fun the last 15 times I played Mirage too, if a little tired, a little predictable, and a little lacking in spark on that account. The most obvious problem with its foundation is the basic act of assassination. Mirage presents a remarkably mundane animation pool. It also doesn't let you choose between high profile and low profile, so instead of being able to choreograph the look and feel of a kill to the player's liking, Mirage puts whether Basim is subtle or bold up to random chance. That's limiting, at best. At worst, it makes the game look stupid as Basim does apparently quiet wrestling takedowns in rimming distance of someone else, or wastes valuable time in a tense situation, because high-profile kills take longer to finish than the quiet ones do. There are corner kills too, if you're in the context of being near a corner. Uh-oh. Sometimes, dragging a guy round a corner isn't what I want to do. Sometimes it's a very bad thing. Ubisoft can't know if I'm in that kind of situation, but I can, which is why a button to say so would have been wonderful. It doesn't help that some things that definitely shouldn't count as corners do. It's a bad idea executed badly. Then the chain kills, which frustrate by automatically assuming I want to chain kill, whipping the camera to whoever the nearest target is, and forcing slow-mo. Sometimes the targeting doesn't work at all as Basim throws a knife into fucking Azerbaijan instead of the guy 3 nanoseconds away from having you blow his spear. And they don't tend to look right either. You're most likely to use them in volatile situations, which is exactly when it's the silliest for Basim to pick up and throw a knife with all the grace and urgency of a divorced construction worker, or when close enough, to casually walk into a low-profile stealth stealth kill. Animation pairing can be a problem. Ledge kills often have Basim stab the air 3 feet to the side of his target, but dumbest of all is what happens when Mirage has no animation to pair. If they're crouched, or sitting down, or standing on a non-flat surface, which to be clear is not rarely, Basim swipes at them like a mildly annoyed house cat. The encounter with a dreaded jailer of Damascus Gate, ladies and gentlemen. Cinema. Basim moves well, but he kills poorly. If not damning, it is at least embarrassing for a game whose sole purpose was to be characteristically Assassin's Creed, that the basic act of assassination fails to live up to titles released more than a decade ago, and perhaps more so for the franchise at large, that with 13 entries, there is no game that has ever nailed this part down. On that note, optimizing the cut. What can you do beyond pressing the assassinate button? Mirage has a gadget wheel. The noisemaker is a distraction, the throwing knife is a ranged kill, the tranq dart, the smoke bomb. You don't need me to tell you what they do. You've probably used them before. It's the standard stealth toolkit. Mirage also introduces Assassin Focus. You might use that before too. It's Shadow Strike, a teleport kill. People felt that was pushing it, too much magic for an assassin to have on hand, and I don't disagree. But understanding the basic philosophy of Mirage's stealth to make killing simple and constant, it makes perfect sense. It's never been easier to eliminate slowness than with the ability to teleport past a sightline or a chasm, or some distance that would otherwise have taken a long time to navigate. Stealth in Assassin's Creed has never been faster. Boring? Mirage? Never. The pace is too high for that. And it's too cool. Slow-mo throwing knives. Airtime only. Dope? It's dopest when you tuck it into the tightest kinds of airtime, like swings or ejects. It'd be doper if it wasn't broken, of course. The UI doesn't load when I aim, which means I have to aim again, which loses me extremely valuable airtime, which happens every time, but fuck it, it's worth it, especially when you do it in combination with the second coolest thing you can do in Mirage, Assassin Focus. Throw a knife, teleport to the other guy, watch the knife join you. Fucking jump off a building, hit a guy, teleport back up to the building, come on! You can do some of the coolest shit you can do in any Assassin's Creed and Mirage, and the new gadget wheel does make room for creative choreography too. Some. Most we've ever had in Assassin's Creed, but that doesn't mean much. It's enough for the kind of guy who makes YouTube clips, but for everyone else, the problem it struggles with is making what creative plays are possible a good idea. Assassin Focus and throwing knives are a large part of the reason that problem is there. See a bunch of guys looking at each other, use a smoke bomb. One of the guys is out of range, use a noisemaker, then a smoke bomb. That was the most interesting thing I ever had a reason to do. The kinds of situations that would typically invite a response more thoughtful than approach, assassinate, like when two or more enemies are looking at each other or close to each other, have never been easier to resolve without a thoughtful plan. Pairs are made trivial by throwing knives, Focus sweeps up groups of 3 or more, and it's not just an alternative strategy, it's a better one. A plan that involves AI leaves room for fluctuations. Same's true for Smoke, with its indistinct timer and its indistinct boundaries. Assassin Focus removes fluctuations. It provides guarantees. By the end of the upgrade tree, which is to say, well before the end of the game, you'd have to be trying to run out of throwing knives. You'll also have enough focus to erase any large group with Focus alone, and it'll recharge quick enough that by the time you come across the next large group, you'll be able to do it again. There is a window in Mirage where the interesting thing is the smartest thing. It isn't open for long. What really doesn't help is that some of the gadgets just suck. The premise of the proximity mine is being somewhere an enemy is going to be. But if you're there, with your hidden blade and everything, then why would you need a trap? Some games can answer that question. Mirage isn't one of them. Until you unlock the Cloud Burst upgrade, sleep darts don't make sense if you have ammo for throwing knives on account of being temporary. And then there's the Berserk Dart. The first time I used the Berserk Dart, he completely ignored everyone near him to zero in on me. The second time I used the Berserk Dart, he detected me through a blend, which... what? The third time I used the Berserk Dart, Zara accused her seemingly traitorous protector of being a thief and an assassin, and Basim responded from stealth,
"It is all the same to me,"
from a distant perch. The fourth time I used the Berserk Dart, I found that it could cheese no-kill missions on an absurd technicality. It wasn't me, officer. It was the turn into a raging zombie virus I injected into their brainstem. Besides that, it's fine, but maybe it's no coincidence that it's the most expensive upgrade in the game. I want to hide it too. Mirage mostly nails the easy-to-learn part. It fumbles hard to master. It struggles to grow beyond its foundation.
What? That's not fair!
Perhaps then the most interesting stealth will come from the encounters themselves. Mirage promised to bring back black boxes from Unity and Syndicate, which is Assassin's Creed's Sigma-pilled codename for big fuck-off levels that provide a more than usual amount of freedom, both by being big and therefore having more options through level design, but also in the form of a handful of narrativized opportunities for things like distraction, infiltration, or a special kill. The benefit is twofold. With more freedom, the player can take more responsibility, feel a stronger sense of ownership of their situation, of their plan, of their successes and their failures. It also means fulfillment of the fantasy, as the invitation to more carefully consider one's method makes you think and behave more like an assassin would. So then, a pretty good idea, but the truth is, the execution has struggled from the start. We've had broken opportunities that make your situation worse, or that simply present overcomplicated ways to achieve what you could otherwise do in a tenth of the time. I also think opportunities have struggled, and still do, on a conceptual level. The problem is that they tend to do the interesting part for you. Opportunities are fleshed out, pre-packaged plans. Solutions you didn't come up with, that you can't then feel responsible for. Solutions you couldn't have come up with, because being scripted and narrativized, they work outside the game's usual logic, which removes most potential for a player to do things their own way within the process of carrying out these plans too. Here's an example. There's a merchant near the prison gate. You can't usually bribe merchants to slip you past a guarded position, so all I can do is talk to him, hope that this opportunity is something useful since I cannot know ahead of time the specifics of a uniquely scripted plan, and then dutifully follow the instructions the game provides. I don't feel involved in solving that problem. It's one way of adding narrative flesh to the infiltration, but it ultimately undermines the level's mechanical purpose, to make the player feel responsible for their process. Because of this, the player must choose whether to do things their way, which is more interesting, or the way that makes for a better story. Well, usually. There was one time I didn't even have that choice. Al Ghul must be lured from his chamber, and the only way to do that is with one of 3 opportunities below. Pick your favorite flavor of prefab plans. If you try to do it yourself, you'll find 3 guards clipping into each other in front of a door that is actually part of the wall. It's tempting to wonder if this kind of thing can work at all, but the answer is yes. Dishonored has done it, with narrativized opportunities that provide an advantage, but not a plan. They open doors, they don't walk you through them, and what further serves to maintain the player's responsibility is that you have to find them, where Mirage makes it known with a single pulse of eagle vision. Black boxes are among the game's best levels, because they are otherwise good levels, but it wasn't enough to just bring back Unity's half-baked ideas. Perhaps the cleanest of all Mirage's attempts to move stealth forward is the Hunter. If you hit Notoriety 3, he's a-comin' fast, and there's nowhere he won't hunt you. He will join any ongoing stealth encounter to search. Kill him first? Nope. You can't one-shot hunters, and if you start fighting, your stealth is gone. So the hunter then becomes a roaming no-go zone, and in that, the most interesting threat Mirage can pose. You never usually experience tension or unpredictability. You never usually need to hide or to use your toolkit for an avoidant purpose instead of a lethal one. The hunter provides a fresh perspective on Mirage. I shouldn't have been so grateful to see someone who was probably going to end up killing me. This is the smartest thing Assassin's Creed has ever done with enemies who can't be stealth killed, but it's an exception. For all its efforts, stealth is nigh unbudged from where it started. Cool, and fun, and limited, and rough, and familiar, and fine. And Mirage knows because it tried, but there's so much more for stealth to be. I sure as hell wish it had been more like Assassin's Creed. But there's just one more thing. It's the way detection spreads, or more specifically, the way it appears to. When you're seen, you get a red icon up top. If that red icon's up there, detection will spread to anyone near you. This happens instantly, even if it doesn't appear to happen instantly, and it happens even if there's no visible or intuitable means by which it could happen. That can lead to unexpected outcomes. You try to kill a guy who should be unaware, who is visibly unaware, who is not moving, who does not have their weapon drawn, but there's no kill prompt, so you sit there giving him a free colonoscopy, and then after a moment of quiet reflection, he turns around and draws his sword. It takes a lot of fucking up for a situation to spiral out of control in stealth because you were given so many ways to recover from mistakes, but if it does, it's often joined by an unhealthy dose of what can only be described as bullshit. Why am I mentioning this now? Because stealth's not the biggest victim. The biggest victim is escape. When the spiraling's done and you're running away from enemies through Baghdad, you might expect that you can hide because you're out of sight, but the icon's still red, so they still know where you are. Or someone else who couldn't see you has. In absence of intuitable rules based on sight or sound, your best bet is to just keep running until it happens that the red fades to yellow. Not to direct yourself with any particular intelligence, trying to break sight with your enemies or trick them by slipping around a corner then quickly changing direction. Having been reduced to just running, that'll be as effective as the movement it pressures. characters, but there is now so little room for choice or the expression of skill in parkour that all you can do is vaguely guide Basim in the right direction. You can't escape faster if you're good. Good is hardly a thing, and if you try to be good, half the time, by means of some Ubisoft-shaped fuck-up, it'll just put you further in the shit. Because of that, escape is characterized less like a challenge and more like a timed punishment. The least it could be then is cool, but it isn't that either. Connor exuded force and fury. Basim doesn't. That lack of urgency, the constant but random periods of slowness from which you'll need to slowly recover, serve in combination to sap escape of its energy. It's annoying enough when Basim drops to a leisurely stroll outside a heated chase, but when every second counts, truthfully, I sort of withdraw and feel this sinking disappointment with the game, like when Gordon Ramsay watches an executive chef set fire to a cabbage. What are we doing here, man? How is this even possible? There's always the horse. Wouldn't recommend it though. Basim's a stickler for the speed limit, you see. Yeah, Mirage balances mounts not with harsher detection or by giving enemies a way to fight them, but with the school's own speed limit. It was worth trying to bring back escape. Running from a pursuing army is cool enough on the level of fantasy, and it provides a useful contrast to the context of power the assassin usually occupies. It's also one of the few things that can make a formal challenge of movement. I respect Mirage for trying, but it is the worst rendition the franchise has ever seen. You're only loosely involved in your success, and it's pressure to a system that can bear no weight. I came to feel it was worth avoiding entirely. Unfortunately for me, Mirage doesn't have a restart mission function, so the best way to avoid a shit show was to let myself be killed, which greatly added to the frustration of the initial fuck-up. But there is another solution to failure in stealth: embracing the chaos, fighting through it. Combat. Mirage's combat. Oh boy. Of all its forms of gameplay, this has generated the most controversy. I think I know why. There are two combat systems in Assassin's Creed Mirage. The first is the one you play on normal, the second is the one you play on hard. But this isn't about challenge or principle, it's about a single mechanical difference. On normal difficulty, parries will instantly break an enemy's defense and open them up for a free kill. Pikemen can take 2. On hard, it's 2 or 3 for everyone. This sounds important. It's more than important. It makes a seismic difference to the way you're encouraged to behave. If every parry kills, and it's easy to master the timing, which it is, and there are lots of attacks to parry, then you can get most of your killing done just by parrying. You can clean up encounters on good time by standing there, waiting for parries. Here's what happens next. Attacking less often means there'll be less considering of light or strong, and stamina will never be a problem, which means you'll never need to consider positioning to conserve stamina. It stops mattering that pikemen can block more than swordsmen because you're not doing the attacks that they can block, and Basim's ability to kick is made completely irrelevant. The kick is something you can do out of a parry, but if parries always kill, why would you ever choose the kick? And without the kick, that's most of what little environmental gameplay there is gone too. It doesn't even feel good. If conventional attacks are making a difference so much less often than parries are, then that context will do as much to make them feel weak as the fact that they also look weak. We've had other games that were much more than mindless counterkills, but in Black Flag, you had multiple weapon types to personalize your flavor of mindless counterkill. So correct me if I'm wrong, but on normal, that would put Mirage in the running for the least engaging combat system Assassin's Creed has ever seen. Okay, so how often is Mirage at its worst? Well, most people trust the intentions of the default experience, so usually. For many, combat is either utterly boring or worth avoiding outright, and Mirage is lesser for it. For me though, I was one of the lucky ones. I remember hearing these complaints thinking, are we even playing the same game? Turns out, not really. On hard, Mirage's heart can start beating. Stamina, drained by attacking and dodging like Valhalla, but used to a different end. Mirage doesn't want to promote aggression, it wants to promote precision, so stamina is noticeably tighter, and light attacks won't bring it back. If you run out, you're vulnerable, and there's not much of it, so you learn how to make sure it doesn't. You are trained to attack only when you mean it, and to dodge only when you need to outgrow reflexive mashing and master intentional pace. It is an aspect of combat skill that I'm glad to see expressed in Assassin's Creed. And it's particularly fitting because it makes combat more assassin-like. We've been working with Origin's hitbox combat system since 2017. Mirage is the first iteration without a frantic energy that has you darting about the battlefield like a pricked balloon. You're precise, confident, like an assassin. Basim's idle animation does him a lot of favors. He doesn't visibly enter a readied state in combat. He stands and waits, projecting that Batman-esque confidence, an invitation, come at me. The need to conserve stamina, combined with the propensity of enemies to overlap their attacks, go on to promote intentional spacing, putting Basim in a smart position, away from the kinds of situation that would drain too much stamina, shepherding the pack in such a way as to isolate a small number of enemies. Mirage also makes it very easy for Basim to hit multiple enemies at once. That saves you time, but since there's stamina, it also saves you stamina, so spacing yourself to better invite such opportunities becomes another useful skill. The combat isn't complicated. In fact, it is profoundly uncomplicated. Basim has one weapon type, which is less than the first game. He has a strong attack and a light attack, and of the 5 enemies in Mirage, you'll mostly be fighting the same 2. What makes it work, what makes that enough, is that everything that could add to the skill space does. In most games, strong attacks and light attacks are presented as a trade-off choice, but how many games have you played where one attack is always better than the other? Or it doesn't really matter which one you choose because you'll never be punished for making the wrong decision. In Mirage, you'll be punished for misjudging the slower attack, and so I considered which one to use. I got better at judging it right. How many games have you played that have interruptions but not consistent interruptions? So not something you pursue with much intent. In Mirage, they're consistent. Strong attacks reliably interrupt, and so I mastered interruptions. Mirage's skill ceiling is high enough that I still had things to get better at deep into the endgame of a second run. A journey that started with getting my ass kicked by 3 guards in an outpost, and ended with me taking on a fortress alone and winning. That steady pace of mastery kept me happy. I had fun. Not boring then. I liked it. I would have liked to like it more, and Mirage wanted me to, but we'll just be staying friends. It's hard to love a game about swords when stabbing a guy with a sword feels more like beating him to death with a shovel. Light attacks barely get a reaction, strong attacks hit like a mace, swords clanging off each other can make sharpness work with health bars. Previous games have done that, and Jedi Fallen Order has proven it can work with a hitbox system. I didn't expect Mirage to reinvent the Origins combat model, but it needed to. The second problem is the grim return of Valhalla's soft-locking. Sometimes you'll be trying to switch targets in combat, and Basim just won't let you. He'll stick to the last person you attacked like they called his mum fat and he can't let it go. This can lead to a bad dodge or lost damage. It's had me dive backwards into a flame stream and denied me the killing blow on a bounty hunter. 3. I was disappointed by the kick. Its main practical effect is moving enemies a large distance. Could be a rich source of depth, using the environment as its own weapon, including other enemies. And it's like the grab from classic Creed, so you get your return to roots brownie points too. But for some reason, likely beyond mortal comprehension, it's the kick itself that does the defense damage, not what you kick them into. So the environmental involvement is nullified. So what's the point in the part where it moves enemies a large distance? The one cool thing you can do with a kick is kicking someone off something, and when it works, the animation, the sense of impact, I get a real kick out of it. When it doesn't, which is far too often, they'll react to a 2-inch step or nothing at all as if it were a brick wall. The kick also has no directional input. Unlike the grab, you can only move someone in a straight line away from Basim, and since you cannot precisely predict enemy movements, that makes lining something up with any specificity like trying to strangle a bar of wet soap. When I do something cool with a kick, it tends to be that the opportunity arose by chance. Let's talk enemies. Brutes are the non-grunt enemy type you'll be seeing most often, idea being the front side is armored, so you can only hit them from behind. Novel and evocative of the precision of the assassin, but waiting for the brute's strong attack is the only practical way to get a damage window, and there's only one optimal series of attacks during that damage window. Other enemies, if present, bring a limited room for fluctuations in that process, but then you unlock the counter roll, which with a little flair reliably plants you right behind your enemy, paving over the only part of the fight that could be interesting. I liked the brutes the first time. The 50th, I met them with a smoke bomb or a sigh, and I wish I was now playing on normal instead, simply to make it 2 repetitions instead of 3. It's the hunters who make the bigger splash. They're meant to be a match for Basim, an old idea for Assassin's Creed, a good one, but not one that has ever quite lived up to its premise. I would have liked to say until now. The hunter feints, parries, leaps from Basim and throws knives in midair. His moveset is challenging and cool, and the most fun to master of all of his kin, but there are some parts you can't master. The parry has no telegraph, and the parry hurts. Sometimes you'll be able to get multiple attacks in a damage window, sometimes you won't, and it'll kill you. So they design one of the best one-on-one fights we've ever had in Assassin's Creed, and then they kneecap it with intentional bullshit? I like this fight more than I don't, but I'm also getting real tired of the bitter X routine between Ubisoft and their own potential. Ultimately, the combat's reach exceeds its grasp. It's really not like it reached that far. So, what about the progression? Well, this should have been an easy win for Mirage. Not like it has to meet the ambitions of an RPG with 100 hours of content, not like it doesn't have a template for how to make this work in a game this size. I like its first idea. Interesting traits with significant impacts on every piece of gear. 50% more damage for a perfect dodge, poison on every 5th hit which pairs nicely with a dagger that makes poison clouds when you kill a poisoned enemy. I wish I could say I experimented, that I was always making interesting choices, but Mirage has a problem. It gives you the best gear at the start of the game. 50% more damage after a parry? Parries get free kills faster? Nothing can compete with that. The robes were the only exception. Now, Mirage has vanity slots, so if you get something that's not as good as what you've got, which is usually, and you like the way it looks, you can at least use its skin separate from its traits. That's something. But Mirage still wants to distribute loot like Valhalla. It uses gear chests as rewards for clearing small nuggets of content, and there are small nuggets of content everywhere. That's the second problem. There's not enough loot to go around. So, to fill the gaps, Mirage uses upgrade schematics. Each item has 3. What that means is that you're 3 times more likely to get a schematic than you are to get an item. Even if the game was balanced, most of the loot pool being something that's probably useless would be insane. Most chests in Mirage give you nothing. This problem has a solution. I know it because it's the solution our return to form didn't take from past Assassin's Creeds. When chests reward money and loot costs money, you can have lots of chests with a limited loot pool, and every chest can feel significant because they always count towards something. I guess the third problem then is that Mirage is memory impaired. The fourth that it's a bitch. The best loot is in the microtransaction store. Cosmetics are a bit ostentatious, but these aren't purely cosmetic. Lifesteal, slow-mo, lightning damage, setting guys on fire? I wouldn't know if they're better than the starting gear, but I know enough to tell you they're cooler, and that being a game that doesn't have enough loot to go around, half of it being locked up in the fucking VIP section leads me to an easy and cathartic conclusion. Ubisoft can fuck themselves. This game costs $50. Last problem's that there's like 4 color dyes for 3 of the costumes, and also that the roster's a bit weak. Half of it's padded out with other people's costumes. Remove those, there's only 3 that look assassin-like, and only 2 before the credits. Sorry, it's not my fault for having taste. One side of Mirage's progression works. It's not the skill tree, which is so forgettable that we should probably just act like I've forgotten it. It's the Ibn Musa's tool upgrades. Idea being you unlock tiers, and then choose one of the upgrades in that tier. Good balance, meaningful effects. You want your smoke bomb to burn people, or make them forget they ever saw you. Heavy throwing knives that stagger, or light ones that can be charged. Range, radius, or ammo. I experimented. I was always making interesting choices, and as I did, there became slightly new opportunities in stealth, valuable specks of variation. Ultimately, your toolkit comes to feel your own in a way it never has before. It's kinda brilliant. It is some of the best progression the franchise has ever seen, and it stands right next to some of the worst. Some so bad that it's worse than the game that didn't even have progression. Almost, Ubisoft. That could be their fucking epitaph. So, how does the narrative fare within Act 2's investigations? Well, it doesn't get off to a good start. This is how you're introduced to the central goal of the game, the hidden Templar master of Baghdad, Ras al-Afar. That was it. The UI is how you're introduced. Oh wait, hang on a minute. If you right-click on the UI and then click on related clues, you find a letter that was neither mentioned nor physically received that says, "Well done for killing Al Ghul, Basim. Oh, by the way, there are other members of the Order in Baghdad too. Kill every single one of them, including their leader, who I heard was called Ras al-Afar. Best wishes, XX Rayhan." Being set off on your biggest quest in that way doesn't really provide you with much emotional fuel. Kill the king. Why? Because a post-it note told you to. But why should I care? It's an illustrative moment of a broad and deeply wounding problem. Perhaps by error, perhaps by reasons of budget or time, Mirage consistently fails to effectively portray the Order. They and the things related to them are too rarely visualized or directly experienced, too often left at merely being described. Of Ka, Roshan describes a widespread and foul corruption, the usual kind, where the rich step on the poor and over again. But where? Where are the poor suffering? We can infer, we can assume, but assumption is weak emotional fuel. We are never made to connect to our charge here. All I see is a marketplace. Al Ghul's investigation, The Slaver, centers on a relentless dig for a hidden artifact, manned by stolen men worked as slaves. At no point do we ever actually get to see a slave or a dig site. Instead, we're told about it in clinical language, and the best we can do is imagine the thing we're here to stop. Experiments are done on the living in the House of Wisdom, subjects led inside an ancient machine named Alra that widens the consciousness for the mortal minds of humans to madness. We'll get to see as much about 5 minutes before the investigation ends. The Order and their evils are ideas Mirage consistently fails to convince you of. And it's a serious problem, because being without identity, it's hard to make me care about defeating them in any other way. They're hidden. You can't know them until the end. It's hard to hate a shadow. Mirage failed to make me care about completing my goals. Having realized that and subsequently shat themselves, Ubisoft commissioned a number of what can only be described as promo trailers that play when you start the climactic assassination missions, recapping the investigation so far and trying their hardest to establish an emotional temperature. It doesn't work. They're also locked at 30. That's jarring. They're directed in a fashion shared by no other cutscenes in the game. That's more jarring. And they're filled with visual information you didn't previously have, which is the most jarring. Oh, that's what Mask Al Ghul wears. Hey, there's a slave. That's what the dig sites look like. Good to know. That's the bigger picture, but it's made of smaller pieces. Mirage's inability to make things that are relevant to the story visible or experiential makes the investigating part of investigations uneventful and boring. Say Al Bumblefuck slapped the wrong girl's ass. Actually, that's too much personality. Okay, Al Bumblefuck was taking 10% more crates of sand from Al Ricky Dick's shipments than he should have been. But how'd you learn that? Not by seeing it happen, not even by seeing evidence it happened. No, you get to read a post-it note that says it happened. Assassin's Creed Mirage's mysteries primarily advance through post-it notes. It's not very engaging. It also makes them harder to follow for the simple reason that it's harder to remember the specifics of disembodied text than it is to remember an event or a place. But as big a deal as that is, it's really no big deal because big deals are a dime a dozen when it comes to Mirage's mysteries. Here's the template. There's a Templar hierarchy. You kill your way up, driven by the goal of uncovering that region's leader. You'll learn details as you go. A fashion sense, a lifestyle, a nationality. They're whodunits, where what's been done is being a Templar. The traditional thing to do in a case like this would be to present a number of possible answers, candidates against which the player would compare clues and change suspicions as more information was gathered. Twists, turns, a red herring, a revelation. I wouldn't be asking for much. We've seen this in Unity, Syndicate, and Valhalla. Doing it right would count as a return to form. But Mirage takes a different approach. There are no candidates, no possibilities, neither people you've met nor people mentioned. That's a strange decision. The significance of anything you learn about whoever it is you're looking for is minimal, with no one for it to point to. And that leads to both a dullness during the meat of the investigation as your progress feels intangible, and the total flaccidity of finding the answer. Before the assassination, you present your findings to the Bureau, where together with your allies you arrive at an identity. It is here that the most important information, indeed every fact that ends up mattering, is revealed. Through speech, from your allies. And in the moments to come, the puzzle will be solved using pieces you never had. It is Beshi who tells us that Al Ghul purchases migrant workers for his dig sites. It is Ali who knows the one man who could do that on the quiet, the merchant Al Yaqub. And it is they who link it to a time and place, the gathering at the Caravanserai. No satisfaction, no click. Because a minute ago, what's clicking didn't exist. I barely even feel like what I've been doing for the past several hours helped, and it soon becomes clear that paying attention isn't worth the effort. Then again, not paying attention might actually help Mirage as much as hurt it. Take the House of Wisdom, an exception to the no candidates rule. Here there is one. Fazil, chief nerd. Really slimy. It's him, isn't it? Yup. Being instantly obvious is just as much a mystery killer, an exception in form but not in result. Basim goes into the assassination not being sure about Fazil's guilt. What's strange is that there is proof. You'll probably have seen it earlier, but of all the things you're required to investigate in the workshop, the proof isn't one of them, and Basim doesn't react if you do. Fazil is the man behind Alra, and he intends to publish works on the ones who came before. Why would the Order want the Isu in the public eye? Wouldn't being a scholar of the Ancients who seems to know far more than he should point the assassins to his being a member of the Order of the Ancients? During a lecture, he's informed by an aide in hushed tones that an assassin has killed his underlings. He retreats into hiding, and everyone else somehow knows he retreated into hiding, despite the fact that the news was delivered in hushed tones. Outside, Basim presses the aide for information about a secret basement. It never occurs to Basim that pressing the man who warned Fazil about an assassin might then proceed to warn Fazil again about a guy dressing like an assassin searching for Fazil's hiding place. It never occurs to Basim that he might be a member of the Order too. Elsewhere, there is a door that requires a passcode. Those who came before are. The code is the following statement. Nearby, two scholars argue about who lost Fazil's book. Basim says, sounds like part of a passphrase. Does it? How does an argument about a book sound like part of a passphrase? You find the book. It's Fazil's masterwork, entitled Those Who Came Before Are Those Who Shall Return. It's Fazil's masterwork. locked up now, but any scholar here would be familiar with the title, particularly the two scholars who were just arguing about this exact book, which means any scholar, when confronted with a prompt "those who came before are," would easily guess the answer and freely pass into Fuzzle's top-secret mindfuck wonder dungeon. Mirage's investigation's made of clues and reasoning, where the clues don't exist and the reasoning isn't reasonable, and they are the only thing Mirage has. Themes? Where? You might get a whiff of an idea 1 in 100 conversations, but most of Mirage reads like a terms and conditions document. Character then? Of course not. The structure's got us stuffed on growth, but we don't even get so much as a personality or a protagonist who drives the plot forward. Think about it. Why are we here? Basim is set a series of tasks not because he is Basim, but because he is an assassin, which he then completes because he is an assassin in exactly the same way as any other assassin, and if he were any other assassin, nothing about 95% of the story would change. The content of Basim's character is irrelevant. It's barely even perceptible. That's a bad move. Do you remember Basim's relationship to his father? 'Cause Mirage don't. Basim's belief that there is hope for people like him. Or the dead children. What children? The rest of Mirage pretends like the first 30 minutes never happened, memory wiping our lead character and paving over his spirited idealism with an all-business attitude. Every exchange becomes clinical, where and when, who and why, never digging further into the people involved. Characters are dimensionless and charmless, often poorly voiced, and always poorly animated. Your friends from Alamut are reduced to exposition terminals. Villains get to be more than shadows for moments before they're killed. There is no one in Mirage who could not be described with less than 5 words, and very few who could not be defined entirely by their role. Assassin, Templar, Rebel, Ali, the spearhead of the Zanj uprising, and perhaps Fazl are the only characters who do anything because of who they are, not just because of what they're employed as. And in a game where people are their job descriptions, it would probably help if their jobs were interesting, but the question looms, what does it even mean to be a Templar? The Order consolidates power and searches for pieces of Eden, but why? If they do it for any reason besides standard self-interest, we'll never know. Do they believe what they're doing is good? Then why are they stereotypical bad guys? Gluttonous, serpentine, cruel. What makes Templar more than a synonym for bad guy? Mirage can't answer that question. And what does it mean to be an assassin? A seeker of wisdom, of truth in all things, a breaker of the shackles of man? As far as you'll be able to tell, the only thing the assassins are interested in is stabbing Templars. Templars, so thoroughly divorced from meaning, now serve only to swallow meaning wherever meaning could be. It's not Baghdad that's rotten. It's not the established order. It's the Order. The other order. The one that doesn't exist and doesn't believe anything. It's not Ka, or the Abbasids, or the merchants who make Ka corrupt. It's the fact that the new treasurer is a member of the wrong Halo clan. There is every impression in modern Creed that when the assassins have killed the last Templar, they would see nothing else wrong with the world, pack their bags and go home. And no, this isn't a new problem, but it's part of a big one. What does it even mean to be Assassin's Creed Mirage? For me, the highlight of the side content was a quest called The Calling, north of the Arkakuf Dunes, where Mirage returns to an old series tradition. Something strange is hidden here, that's all you're told. So you search, a fresh mode of engagement from Mirage, with a genuine tone of mystery, and in the deep is a door that leads to a hidden Isu temple, which Basim doesn't react to. But further inside is the endgame gear set, like the Mayan armor in Black Flag or Altair's kit in Assassin's Creed 2. One thing these always got right was being genuinely cool. This is an endgame goal. Looking like that makes it a motivating goal, and their narrative stature is something more than just another gear set, something alien, mythical, mystical, not something your character is necessarily considered to have canonically worn, can provide a satisfying climax to the arc of your progression. To have come from rags and become a knight of the oldest order makes the journey feel uniquely complete. It worked for Ezio, it worked for Edward, it works for Basim. Well, it might work for Basim. Mirage does things a little differently. You get mysterious shards from members of the Tharbin cult. You can come to the temple at any time from the start of Act 2, and each gear piece costs a certain number of shards. Chances are you'll come here late and unlock everything at once, but you can come here early and choose what you want first. That's a new, significant element of choice brought to a player's progression that we've never had before. That's a really cool thing. 2 problems. 1, it's a little hard to justify using the dagger when the starting dagger exists. Turns out, assassin recruits are better equipped than the literal Isu. 2, that does mean you can unlock This, before the story's even halfway done. I'm sorry. Taking Mirage seriously is hard enough. They shouldn't have let you get this early. Or, it shouldn't have been this ostentatious in the Isu fashion. You'd be better off dressing as a clown than wearing this while pretending to investigate the nature of the ancients. Vanity slots only help so much when you're shooting lightning out your ass on air assassinations. Still, Mirage gets away with this W mostly unscathed. There are other collectible hunts in Mirage. They aren't as good. At some point, lost books start appearing on your map. I don't know why, or why we start collecting them, or who this man we're meant to bring them to is, but at least you get a skill point. Well, that and the opportunity to dress like this. Exciting. What happened, Ubisoft? Will these lost books tell me where to find your marbles? Cause their marbles are lost too. Fuck me. Okay, next up, Dervish's artifacts. These are pickpocket jobs on Baghdad fat cats, with incredibly tight timing. If you hit it, it's a high. If you don't, you have this scene of public social embarrassment. You can run away, holding back your tears, try again later, or you can take it off their corpse, along with the shame and notoriety that follows. I like it. Play smartly on Mirage's strong social mechanics. Well, that is until you unlock the sleep darts, or until you realize what they can do, which in this case is make the affair mindless to the point of pointlessness. I'll give that half a W. Check out what happens when you bring the artifacts to Dervish. You get this impression of Basim moving his arm, while Dervish stands there like a plank staring into space. Then, eventually, Basim goes, "Hey man, how are the oh shit. Look, I brought the artifacts." And Dervish, still vacant, presents your reward. Normal upgrade materials that you'd get from any other chest. Come back with 9 more? Fuck me. I'd rather have the Jinni haunting my dreams than Mirage's dead-eyed skinwalkers. Don't you remember the children, Dervish? Mirage's collectibles suck. Possibly the hardest collectibles in one of these games have ever sucked. Not a good start. Let's talk about the side quests. Criticizing contracts for being shallow never sat well with me. They're mostly good stealth arenas. It's not unlikely a person would want that. A good deal of them make solid encounters from places you've never been to before, distant parts of the map you'd never have another reason to visit. Some of them even make an effort to be interesting, which usually backfires when they try doing that with narrative on account of Mirage's painfully charmless dialogue, but things tend to go better with gameplay. Extracting a hostage from the middle of a bandit camp without killing anyone? That's an interesting encounter, and it's completely unique. Another has you rescue an informant who is allergic to spices, so he sneezes, which alerts nearby guards. You have to plan ahead to deal with that. The real problem is the pairing of these bonus objectives with the fact that you can't restart missions in Mirage. Having to let yourself be killed makes the frustration of a small fuck-up big. Tales of Baghdad are what Mirage calls Valhalla's world events. Like Valhalla, they are shallow and short, but unlike Valhalla, they don't have a boldness of concept to make them memorable. I did like the one where Basim convinces a child to jump off a building, but most of it's more along the lines of finding a book or a gravestone or a woman's vase. There are 6 of them, 3 are in the outskirts. Given Baghdad's scale, odds are good you'll go your run without seeing a single one. You wouldn't be missing out. So what about conventional side quests? Or should I say conventional side quest? There's one of them. So that means they put in a lot of effort, right? The 40 Thieves is about the famous merchant Ali Baba, but actually it isn't because that'd be too interesting, so he's dead. It's about his daughter, Marjana, who wants revenge on all 40 of the thieves who did him. Marjana is a tough woman, fighter type. She's taken from a common stock, and there ends up being little to her besides likability. Basim reaches no towering heights, but being a thief, he can relate to the pull of the coin, and it's engaging for the brief moment he displays some amount of reflection. There's a certain amount of build-up to finally meeting the thieves. You lay the trap, and who walks in but the guards? Except Black, with swords and bows and armor, who spread out in a soldier-like fashion and talk amongst themselves loudly. I'm unconvinced by their hideout. For one, it's not a secret, which you'd think it'd need to be on account of being home to Baghdad's most wanted. In fact, it's about as not a secret as you could get. For another, it's just a treasury. You come upon a man being beaten by the king of thieves, but that might be a fetish thing, because if you cause any alarm, the captive magically escapes his binds, stands up, pulls a sword out of his ass and starts searching with a king like nothing happened. You kill the king. Marjana tells us she thought it'd make her feel better. Same way as every character in every revenge story ever told. And then the quest is over. Why fucking bother? 4 out of 10. Mirage's side quests suck. Possibly the hardest side quest in one of these games have ever sucked. Not a good finish. And I suppose that brings us to the ending. Maybe we shouldn't have bothered waiting. When you've completed your last investigation, the final hunt begins for Raz al-Afar. There are 3 candidates. Yup. Candidates. Mirage has finally figured out how to tell a mystery, and so now when we learn things, we wonder, is this the person? Does this fit? Clues carry a clearer significance. We've achieved the bare minimum, boys, and that makes the fact that the rest of the game couldn't stranger. But it's not the only improvement. The following missions are not post-it notes and cardboard, they have real personality. You pose as a eunuch and find yourself the unwilling servant of a ditzy maid. It's the game's funniest mission. You track the forbidden love of a celebrity poet as she escapes the control of her patrons. It's memorable. You investigate the governor of Baghdad himself. He sold you out, revoked Alamet's protections, because it helped the city. He believes in putting the immediate material reality before the squabbling of two idealist factions. Basim lashes out, but he doesn't know what to say to that. The governor wins. It's the most interesting exchange in the game, which is to say, it's good. Don't get the wrong impression. Coming out of a 12-hour coma would flatter any sign of life. These missions aren't gold. They're good. It's just that makes them the best thing that's happened since the introduction. As we cross names off our list, Basim's story moves towards a climax. He learned to squash the questions about the things he saw with Nihal. The assassins demanded it. Roshan taught him focus, but the Jinni wouldn't go away. There's something inside him, something arcane pulling at his mind. He's daunted by strange diagrams. He fears a foreign language, closing the book. He sees Alra, which doesn't affect him at all. Listen, it's still mostly foreshadowed well, okay? Shut up. Nihal tries to break Basim free of his narrow-minded creed, the assassins who have allowed him to hide away in denial. She begs Basim to help her search for the truth. She fails. Until now. Raz al-Afar knows Basim is more than a man. She makes him a straightforward offer. Find what lies beneath Alamet. It was always meant for him, but there's no time to respond. Mirage's characteristically wooden dialogue flows beautifully in this scene.
Purge yourself of the poison she dripped, and come home to us. No more than a man, but no less than our brother. Or is it too little for you?
Mirage is mature enough to not simply flip a switch on Roshan from hero to villain. She knows if Basim is what the Templars believe he is, then it will destroy him, and if he continues down that path regardless, then he has put more faith in them than in the Brotherhood, and there's no coming back from that. There's complexity to their conflict. You understand both sides, but you don't really feel it. Why would you? This plot has been little more than a minor distraction for the meat of Mirage. We've hardly seen Roshan at all since the introduction. With Nihal, you ride for Alamet to find it razed by the Caliphate. The Governor's doing. Nur lies dying in a cave. Basim vows revenge. It's not our way, Nur counsels. Even bleeding to death, he still clings to the creed. Basim knows what it is to be trapped by this dogma. It's a well-conceived scene, but its real power comes from the latest recreation of Ezio's family. The traditional approach is to simply do what Jesper did but with a new game sound suite, or to simply add more epicness, resulting in a piece that may be good, but that feels more obligatory than fitting. Mirage takes the melody that we accept as the symbol of the Brotherhood and breaks its heart, because that's what's happening. The pace is slow, the strings despair. In Arabic, a man sings about being lost. Where is my home? Who am I? It's a brilliant composition, used brilliantly. The following sequence is rote killing to save people you don't know or care about, but it's got an aura of drama, and most of that's owed to Brendan Angelides. The precursor vault is serviceable. In modern Creed, ISU architecture tends toward a generic mess of silver shapes and RGB lighting that succeeds at looking cool but fails to feel particularly alien, to create a sense of reverence or entrapment or dread. It does look cool, it's also bland. We find a prison cell. Nihal is inside, and it's revealed who she really is. A ghost, an embodiment of an ancient self, the old him waiting to be reawakened. Low-key? He's low-key. He was the one cowering from a shining tormentor, the Jinni, his trauma-given form. If you never played Valhalla, this is news. If you did, what made Mirage interesting was finding out how Basim became Loki. For you, Nihal is the twist. Everyone gets a twist. Smart. Basim now walks the underworld in search of his tormentor. Silent figures, memories frozen in time. A red light to mark his pain. A red light to say danger, but also as an echo of alarm in a facility, a prison. The sounds near the Jinni are all electric, deep synthetic groans. In understanding his demons, he dispels them, and Loki is allowed to come through. Nihal and Basim bond. Enkidu sees someone else in her master's body. The imagery here, the use of gameplay to convey a wandering sense of loss and cutscene where better appropriate, are the most skillful illustrations in Mirage, but there's only so much it can do. It engaged me. It didn't move me, because beneath the set dressing is the story it's trying to tell, and that story sucks. Loki is reborn? Okay. I don't know Loki. Loki isn't a character in Assassin's Creed Mirage. At most, he's a faint memory from a different game, but he has no connection to Basim within this one. To him, to this story, he's a haunting speck of light. We erase the demons of this stranger, but how? By touching it? By remembering it? Where's the struggle there? Where's the lesson? But perhaps I should not be asking these questions of a game that seems to have forgotten Basim has his own trauma. And as for Basim, he just ends. What is a man but the sum of his memories? The sum has changed, tipped in the favor of a god. Basim is someone else now, and I didn't feel a thing. He has died a half-death, and it didn't make me feel a thing. It didn't even seem like it was trying to. Where was Basim's fear of ending, of becoming someone else, of being claimed by a strange world? Where was his denial? There could be hope, empathy, acceptance, sacrifice. I've seen this story told with feeling, but Mirage doesn't do the digging. It doesn't even pick up the shovel. If it had started now, it might have done some good, but it needed to start 12 hours ago. Roshan is gone, Nur is dead, Nihal and Basim have become a stranger, and I don't care. It hurts how little it hurts, but these are characters of a story that hasn't been a story since the title dropped. Mirage is a beginning and an end, either side of an ocean of nothing. You can't make something from nothing. Mirage is a portrayal of the mechanics of Loki's return. It's not a good story about Loki's return, and so it's not a good prequel to Valhalla either. And what's there left to be? What does it mean to be Assassin's Creed Mirage? All the things that were meant to define this game, the assassins, Alamet, the Jinni, Loki, are watered down to imperceptibility or barely even present. And everything else about it has been done before. So, is it a return to roots then? Sure. If the roots are the shape of an assassin in the presence of stealth, you can parkour again. But what does parkour mean, beaten down to this? What's the point? Wouldn't a return to roots mean having an identity? Charm, of course. A heart and a sincerity. At a reach, something to say, but at least a decent story. Not one butchered by a non-linear structure that it did not inherit from the old games, but from the new Assassin's Creeds. Like its stilted exchanges, all of its puzzle mechanics, the death screen, the death animation, Basim's signature move, the problems with Basim's signature move, the way Basim moves, the world events, even the dialogue options, which in Mirage almost never present a choice with emotional content, and so only serves to make the game's already robotic business talk flow worse, or to slow the process of using merchants. Not so smart to start a return to roots project with the foundation of a game that wasn't even trying to be a member of the same franchise. A good game then? Is it at least that? Funny that turned out to be the hardest question. It's fine, I think. I don't know. The sum of its parts doesn't settle on good, but the truth is, in my heart, I really like this game. For the same reason there's not an Assassin's Creed I don't like. Look, being here, walking these streets, doing cool shit in them. This is the one way Mirage is truly like its predecessors. I'd tolerate anything for this. I always have, and I'm tired of needing to. Mirage made my love for Assassin's Creed feel imprisoning, because this game I really liked playing is the 13th Assassin's Creed, and in many ways, it's worse than the first game. In some ways, it's the worst of them all. It's the most heartless and the most charmless. And I think it's demented that in Assassin's Creed 13, we're dealing with flaws from 10 years ago. We can't even jump in a game where parkour is meant to mean freedom. We've chosen a structure that won't even let us tell a story. I really like Mirage, and I resent it. How can this be enough anymore? Because it's normal? Or perhaps because of the context it was judged in? In 2023, it had been 8 years since Assassin's Creed had felt like Assassin's Creed. Odyssey pushed things so far away, and Valhalla lied about being any different. There was a doubt among old fans that Assassin's Creed would ever find itself again. Mirage was made to address that doubt. Its charge, according to its audience, was to simply be more like Assassin's Creed than Valhalla, to be a step in the right direction, to be a sign that Ubisoft still knew what that direction was. Everyone would have liked a good story, but it didn't need to be good. It needed to have assassins in it. The parkour only needed to exist. Mirage did what it needed to do, but it didn't do enough for me. It's too little to have simply earned its title. Today, we know Mirage as the game that came after Valhalla, a cure to a drought, but in 10 years' time, that won't mean a thing. It'll stand side by side with all the other games in a flat category named the past, and there'll be nothing for it to save us from. What will it mean to be Mirage then? What will we see? A game that is worse than the games it exists to remind us of? That fails at being a prequel and lacks an identity of its own? An illusion, a fleeting satisfaction that left us once again wanting more. Special thanks go out to Elle Hudson, Lex Williams, Andre Baltuta, Holy Shift, Dennis Williams, Combat Wombat, John Lemley, Dylan Schaefer Murphy, The Last Great Opium Den. That last retrospective on Control was great, well done. I busted my ass on that one, thanks, that means a lot. Dan Walker, Shinku, Caleb Finnemore, DJ, Chino, Chase Baker, G Series, William Vossler, Joe Simmons, I Pay My Cam Girl So Why Not You, Arcturus, Navy Husky, Save, MT the Poet, Deluxo, Calvin Black, Dr. Pavel, Carlos Skibber, Enzo, John C., Corey Walterbeek, Hidibari, Floyd Dibben, Monochrome Only, Ethan Seach, Jack, Connor Fraser, Milo W., Ray Cantwell, Fat Guy 688, Joshua Carr, Purple PP, Pitslab, Joshua Lovejoy, Veda, Cole Bramlett, Essel and Benefil Ladogo, Patsy, Lubos Thomas, Prudy, Whitelight Pascal, Milo Adams, Creepus, Tentmaster Kafka, New XC, Very Professional Dodo, Douglas Totally Straight Up Anonymous Yo, Mark Carter, Nikita Shoshin, Dog, Best Dog. I echolocate my husband using your voice. I still don't really know what that means. I hope it's nice. Nebulous Rascal. Showbud? Or is it Seobud? Bumble, grumble, double, crumble, bumhole, pummel, shovel, puddle, huddle, jumble. It's just getting easier. Tide Moore, LA Lockwood, Anna Haig, Fox Hunt, Logan Briggs, and Derek Woods.